Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Fantastic. And do you see the chi-square PowerPoint tablet slide? Fantastic. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're logging in from. Again, I'm Dr. Reggie Taylor, and I'm an academic success coordinator in the Office of Research and Doctoral Services. And this evening, I will be doing a session on the chi-square test. Um, Just go over a few housekeeping things. We just want to make sure that we keep our phones muted. Remember, the session is being recorded, um, and things of that nature. I won't get too much further into that. We all know what that's about. But remember, one of the things we want to do is ease our anxiety. And trust me, in this 30, 45-minute session, no one comes away and is expected to come away with complete knowledge of categorical data analysis. We're just going to examine one test, a very basic test, the basics of the basics, to get you a good understanding of the conceptualization of the chi-square test. Um, and we always usually start out with the scales of measurement, because I'm sure you're aware now that the statistical test that you are going to run, in this case, the chi-square test of association, obviously, you have to select the correct scale of measurement variable to run that test successfully. So again, we're going to make sure that we know that connection between the scales of measurement and the chi-square test, just as we've done with all the other tests. We'll take a look at an exemplar, again, that I will give you to take for your future use. Again, I always encourage you to complete the survey, optional, of course, and anonymous. And sometime tomorrow, hopefully, at the latest, the recording link can be found on this YouTube site. So you'll have this presentation also, and we'll be able to get to those links. So again, scales of measurement, we've beat ourselves in the head over this, and I think we all understand the importance of that now. For those, how many on the call here have been on several of the sessions earlier in the last month or two? Fantastic. And you know how one of the first things we always talk about are those scales of measurement, because we know now that when we look into a data set, one of the most important things that we have to look for is the scale of measurement, and then aligning that with this type of statistical analysis that we want to conduct. And that's very, very important. And I really hope that you've come away with that important concept when you look into a data set. Now, in this case, what we're going to be working with is what we call categorical data when we work with the chi-square test. And we know now that that categorical data is what we call nominal data. Now, you can do the chi-square test with ordinal data, but we're not going to get into that. But we're going to work on nominal data, a very basic example. And we know that that's categorical data. For example, gender could be categorical, male, female. Political affiliation can be nominal, Republican, Democrat, things of that nature, those nominal variables. And the first thing that we want to know and make sure that we understand is that when we go to run this chi-square test, which we'll come to learn what that is here in just a second, is that we must make sure the first thing is that we are working with and select nominal data. Because anything after that, if we select the scale data, which is the interval ratio, the outcome is going to be incorrect. Now, what is a chi-square test of association? It does exactly that. It assesses the association between two or more categorical variables, just as we've talked about, in this case, the nominal variables. And you can click on the scales of measurement link there for a very detailed review of the scales of measurement. And for example, a question could be, is there a significant association between gender and smoking behavior? And the key thing to understand with this basic chi-square is that we are not distinguishing between independent and dependent variables, okay? Just like if you recall from the Pearson's correlation test that we did we didn't have an independent and dependent variable. We were just looking at to see how two variables were related to each other. Same concept here. And again, for those that attended the Pearson's correlation session, this is the exact same test, except the data is now nominal and not numerical. Does that make sense? Now, what we're going to look at is a very basic, and the basics of basics is a 2x2 chi-square table. And what do we mean by that? It means there's 2 rows and 2 columns. So for example, the gender variable, we have a male and a female option. In the smoker option or variable, we have 2 categories also. The individual responded, yes, they smoke, or no, that they don't smoke. So as you can see, there's no numerical operations we can do. We can't get averages. We can't subtract. We can't do those things because these are nothing but categories. But we can analyze categorical data. And the chi-square test of association is that first very basic test that will allow us to see if there is an association between male and female and smoking or non-smoking. In other words, are the proportions of male different from the proportions of females that smoke? Yes or no? We don't know, but we're going to find that out here. Now, let's take a look at an example. Here's a research question. Is there a significant association between gender and smoking? And again, I don't want you to get caught up in remembering that you heard somewhere that word "and" separates the predictor from the dependent variables. That is true in other types of tests. But in this case, it's just we could have put smoking first and gender second, okay? Because we're not making a distinction between independent and dependent variables. And then the logical aligned hypotheses. There is no association, and there is an association between those variables. It's as simple as that. So if you're working on an application assignment, you're going to look into a data set, you're going to look for those nominal variables, and that's where you're going to start, and you'll formulate a research question based on those nominal variables that you select. Now, let's take a look at that and how we would do that in SPSS. But before we move on, though, is everybody okay in understanding the general conceptualization of the chi-square test? Fantastic. Again, just a very basic test, just like the Pearson's correlation, but we don't have numbers. Okay, we have categories of data. So we're just counting those categories, and then the analysis is going to look at the proportions of males and females that responded yes and no, and let us know if there is a significant association between those two variables. And again, you're well aware, we're not trying to imply any cause and effect relationship between these two variables. Now, in SPSS is a very simple procedure, but again, many people have tried to find the word chi-square once they clicked on analyze, and you won't see it here at this point. But again, what you'll do is you click on analyze, you go into descriptive statistics. Now, we know that descriptive statistics is where we get means and medians and modes and all those types of things. But then you're going to come down to something called crosstabs. And that's what you're going to select for this chi-square test. Again, analyze, descriptive statistics, crosstabs. And it doesn't matter which version of SPSS you're using, because once you click on analyze, which will always be in your top main menu, the descriptive statistics will always be in that sub menu. And then after descriptive statistics, that sub menu will always have a crosstabs option, version 29, 28, 27, etc. Okay. Now, when we get into the crosstabs, this is where we now tell SPSS what we want to do. And it's very simple. Remember, the variables that are going to be in the data set will be populated in this big area here. And you're going to take variables out of here and put over in this area. But remember now, we are looking for nominal variables. And remember, we said that we can just actually look at the little graphics here and tell what the scale of measurement is. For example, that's a ruler, a scale, that's a scale variable. And we know that the little balloons represents a nominal variable. We now also know that the little ordered bar graph is ordinal data, etc. So we know that when we're going to do this chi-square test, what we need to end up with is two variables that have the circles, okay? Meaning they are nominal variables if they have been input correctly. Everybody okay with that? Putting a scale variable in here is going to be incorrect, okay? Two nominal variables. Then we're just going to click on statistics just to tell it we want to get some specific data. And we always wanted to give us the chi-square value. That's what we are calculating, the chi-square statistics. So make sure that we always select chi-square. And then you see nominal here. Make sure that you have the phi and Cramer's V selected. Now, what are those? You recall from all the other statistical tests that we did that we had to provide a measure of the effect size? Yes, remember R square in some cases, ETA square in some cases, Cohen's D. Does everyone remember that? Effect sizes? Well, this is the same thing for the chi-square test. We have to report effect sizes, and those will be something called phi and Cramer's V. So again, as you can see, every test really gives us the same information, but it's just in a different format, or it's named something different. So we know from multiple regression that the R square value would be the measure of effect size. Well, chi-square doesn't give us an R square value, but it will give us a phi value, and it will give us a Cramer's V value. It will give us all of these values if we select those, okay? Now, in the case that you are going to do a chi-square test with ordinal data, then you would come over here in this area and select an appropriate effect size. Okay, so for now, just make sure you have chi-square selected and phi and Cramer's V. And you'll continue from that point on, okay? Now, the next thing is that we want to go into the cells option, okay? Remember, the variables are still in here, smoker, yes or no, and the sex or the gender, male or female. In cells, what we'll find is where we want to select the counts, how many were observed, and then just kind of follow this slide here, percentages in the rows and columns, etc. Just click on these things here. Then what will happen is you'll get the results of the chi-square test. And I think now that most of you can look at these things and start getting an understanding of what we're saying here in this area. But now remember, one of the most important things is you'll get something called a case processing summary. That's going to let us know the sample size, N. So there were 436 cases or records or individuals who participated in this research and gave responses, or at least that's the number of cases that were used. You can see here that 3 were missing, etc. Now here, remember we selected cross tabs? This is nothing but a cross tabulation table, letting you know males, yes, smokers were 33, no were 151, total of 184 males. Females, 52 smoked, 200 didn't, for a total of 252, and the total numbers. Excuse me. So even though it says cross tabulations, I kind of call it descriptive statistics. We know how many and how many responded in each category. Does everybody see that? So I guess we can move on. Fantastic. The next important piece will come down to answer that research question. This is the chi-square test information. Now, remember, we're going to look into the sig column, and we're going to look for the two-sided. The sig column is always where you got three sigs here, the asymptotic, the exact sig, and exact sig, one minus sided. Go into the asymptotic significance right here, two-sided, because you'll see values there. And from this, can you tell me if I use this line and this 0.562, was this a significant association? Yes or no? Anyone want to take a stab? Just type it in the chat. No, it's not. And remember now, we always assess significance at 0.05. And so we know that now the chi-square test, basically there's no association between gender and smoking. Now, but you'll note that you got the Pearson's chi-square, the continuity correction, the likelihood ratio, the Fisher's exact test, the linear by linear. And you say, well, Dr. Taylor, which one do I use? Well, for a 2x2 table, you use the continuity correction. Okay? If you have a 2x3 table, now let me explain what that may be. A 2x3 table may be where you have three categories of gender, say male, female, non-binary responses. So three categories, and then you also have the two yes, no. So you can see that you can have more categories. So anything larger than a 2x2 table, you report when we come down here to the you do continuity correction. Anything larger than that, you would probably use the Pearson's chi-square, okay? But we know we're using a 2x2, so we know we use the continuity correction. It was not significant. As a matter of fact, nothing was significant here if you use any of these other ones, okay? And the effect size is in the symmetric measures, okay? That's the effect size. So these are the four critical pieces that you will need. The case processing summary, the cross tabulation, the results of that chi-square test, which were not significant, and also the measure of effect, which is the symmetric measures, okay? And we're going to look into the value column, okay? And remember, if we take the decimal point, move it 2 places to the right, 3.4% effect, of the variance in those variables. So really, it's not significant, but the key is that this is not significant here, okay? Now, remember, if you had a table larger than a 2x2, then you would report the Cramer's V, okay? Now, how do we write that up? As we did all the other tests. We just basically state what we did, a chi-square test of association. And I just like to put with Yates continuity correction. And that just lets me automatically know that I did a 2x2. You could even say a 2x2 chi-square test of association. There's a lot of ways to do this, okay? These are just examples. Was conducted to examine the association between, almost just repeating the research question. Gender, is there an association between gender and smoking status? Then we notice here what's missing. No assumptions. No assumptions in this write-up, because the chi-square test is what we call a non-parametric test. And remember, in the other sessions, and in the other exemplars, I state that the Pearson's correlation or the multiple regression or the ANOVA is a parametric test. Parametric means that it has those data assumptions that we need to assess in SPSS. When we move to the non-parametric family, those assumptions are out of the window. We can't look at linearity and skewness and all those types of things with data to just going yes, no, if that kind of makes sense. It's not giving us that variance to kind of plot it. It's either yes or no, a 0 or 1, a 0 or 1. So it's not a lot you can do with it. These types of tests, the chi-square tests, are not considered as powerful and as robust as a parametric test. Not saying that you can't use it in research, but it comes with its limitations, if that makes sense. So now the results were not significant. Now remember, we had a T that came when we were doing t-test. Remember, we had the F that came when we were doing the regression. Well, we're going to do the chi-square. That's the chi-square symbol, letting us know a chi-square test. Anyone want to take a stab at the one that attended any of the other sessions? What would that one represent inside the parentheses there? And where did I get it from? Exactly, Kate, the degrees of freedom. What are the degrees of freedom? If we come down here on that same line, you see the DF and you see one. But now more specifically, what that means is that we had two variables, and the degrees of freedom is actually calculated as the number of variables minus one. So 2 minus 1 is 1. So this is another way now that I know that this was a 2 by 2 chi-square test, because that 1 tells me that there were two variables. Does that make sense? Exactly, Mufaya, n minus 1. Then we're going to report the sample size. The n equals 436. It comes right from the case processing summary. Okay. Then what was the chi-square value? It was 0.34. You see the chi-square test? The value, I just rounded it up. It was 0.337. So I rounded it to 0.34. Does everyone see that? Remember, everything you're going to report for the 2 by 2 is on this continuity correction line. So you had the 1 degree of freedom. The value of the chi-square statistic was 0.337, rounded to 0.34. The p is 0.56, the sig value, right? You see here, 0.56. I just rounded that to 2 places. Not significant. And then I recorded the effect size, the phi value, 0.03. And I got that right here. Does everybody see that now, how we're transferring that? But note, you're doing the same thing in any good reporting of statistical results. You're going to report those effect sizes in addition to the p-value. Okay? Now, let's do this. Okay, give me a second. Now, let's take a look at the exemplar that we'll be working with and I'll be giving you. And it's the same thing, okay? The abstract talks about the 2 by 2 chi-square. Okay. The forward is the same, just changing for the test. And remember, this is not a prescriptive answer, but it just gives you a play it safe and you're putting in the basic information that's needed. Other individuals may want you to do something and add something to this. Here's the research question. Is that an association between whatever variables you select? Your null is always there is no association. This is the hypothesis that you are seeking to reject and accept the alternative and say that there is a significant association. So in this example that we just looked at, what would we do? Would we accept or would we reject the null hypothesis? Would we accept it or would we reject it? Exactly, Laura. We would accept it because we are saying that there is no association. So we have to accept this based on the results right here, 0.562. Now, as you know, in the exemplar, I always give you what I think will be the minimum of what you would need. So make sure that you have the case processing summary, the crosstab, the chi-square test, and the symmetric measures that you cut and paste, as you can see here. The case processing summary, the crosstabs, the chi-square test, and the symmetric measures, which again are the measures of the effect size. And for a 2 by 2, you use the phi. If you select anything larger than the 2 by 2, you select the Cramers. Okay? Now, what I wanted to do was just open up the data set that we use for this example. Again, just to show you now what it looks like in a data set. And we're going to run this live in SPSS. Now, remember, the first thing I always suggest you do is to say, okay, I know that the chi-square test uses nominal variables. So go in your measure column and make sure that you look in your measure column and you know that these are variables that you cannot use. All of these are scale here. You know you can't use these variables, okay? But we know that this one is possible, nominal, this one's possible, this one's possible, this one's possible, this one's possible, they're nominal, okay? So, but now let's do that example that we did. Now, remember also too, when it's a nominal variable, that the values column is what you want to look into to see how the researcher coded that and how many categories or levels in the category. So here under the sex variable, let's look in here. Remember, we can click on the in the corner here, and we see that this data set was coded as 1 for males, 2 for females. Okay. So this is a nominal variable with two levels to the category, males and females. Okay. Did they smoke? They asked them that question. And let's see how they could respond. In one of two ways, yes or no. Okay? So I also want you to understand behind the scenes how the data is input in there to be able to do the analysis correctly. So now, if we were to run that, we would go into the analyze. Okay? Remember the descriptive statistics. And then we would select the crosstab, descriptive statistics, and we would select the crosstabs option. Now, all of the variables will show up here. We're going to take gender, and we're going to take, do they smoke? Right there. Those are the two by two. And statistics, remember, always get the chi-square, the phi, and the Cramer's V, which will give you your measures of the effect size. Okay, continue. We hit cells. Make sure we have observed. Continue. And we can run the test. Hit OK. And there are the results again of what we looked at. Remember the case processing summary, 436. This is almost like the descriptive statistics. How many were male? How many were females? Total of 85 males, total of 351 females. A total of 85 yes responses and a total of 351 no responses. So regardless, you can still even look at this data and kind of say the majority of the individuals, regardless of gender, did not smoke. Remember how we talk about start to look at this data and make sense of it and to be able to understand the underlying nature of that data. Now we go to look to see the results of the inferential test. And because it was a 2 by 2 chi-square test, we look into the continuity correction and we see the value, not significant. And down here are the Cramer's V and the phi values. Okay? So now let me go ahead and while I am remembering, I'm going to go into the chat now and I'm going to put these documents for you into the chat. Give me just a second. Okay. And you let me know once they show up. I'll let you know when they're sent. Okay, the chi-square PowerPoint should be in there now. And let's find the exemplar. Okay, now please check in there and make sure that both those documents are there and you're able to retrieve those documents. Okay? Can I get some yes, no's, thumbs up, or something to make sure? Because once we get out of the fantastic, yeah. So remember, this is a very simple test, and you kind of know the nature of statistical analysis now. You're kind of following the same format. Each test has assumptions, but when we get to the non-parametric, we really don't have to worry about those assumptions. And this test is the chi-square test, the first one that we've looked at with categorical data. And remember, those tables can get more broad. It can be a 3 by 5 table where one table has one variable has 3 categories and the next one has 5. I mean, these things can get really, 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 really elusive there. So don't try to take on too much. Just look for, a 2 by 2 table, or whatever's appropriate for whatever application you have to do. But no, this test is not, Teresa, used to find out the sample size. You would use some other software, such as G-Power 3, which is a software that you can download. I'm going to put the name of it in the chat. And that's called the power analysis. And that's where you calculate the required sample size prior to even running the analysis. But that's not the focus. But I'm going to type that in there, G star power. Now, the name is in there, G power. And if you just kind of put that into your browser, it'll actually take you to the web page where you can download the sample size calculation software called G power. Okay. And just make sure you be aware that they have a Mac and a PC version. So depending on what type of computer you have, just select the appropriate one. Okay. And as a matter of fact, though, give me just a second. Let me look at something here. I thought I had did a session on sample size for the chi-square test, but I guess I didn't. But yeah, once you get the G-Power software, it will kind of lead you through that process of calculating. And that's important too. Any statistical analysis, you want to make sure that you calculate the appropriate sample size needed. And that's a big requirement in quantitative research that, once we do all the problem statements and purpose and we get the research questions and then we know the analysis, then we need to go into the process of, okay, how many do I need from a scientific perspective to have some reliability in my results? And that's called a process of power analysis or sample size calculation. And just keep your eye out for sessions. I'll probably be doing something on that very shortly. Okay, well, if everyone has, as a matter of fact, let me see. This is G Power here. I'm going to see if I can bring it up. Now, it shows up very small on my screen here, but this is the G Power software, okay? And you can see the test family. And remember how we talked about t-test family? Remember the f-test family for the regression test and all those types of tests? Here's regression. And this is what I'm talking about when you need to calculate the sample size, okay? Again, which is beyond the scope of what we're doing here. But here's the chi-square test right here, okay? You see the chi-square test. And I guess it's a generic one, but I'd have to figure out what this information would be here. But anyway, this is what you would have to do, a power analysis, and you can see it's called G Power 3.1. Okay. So now the only other thing that I have here is that please take the opportunity to fill out the survey to let me know how these things are working. Do we need to continue them? Are they right at about the pace that you need them, etc. I don't know. I don't know what's on your mind, but the more that I know, the more I can be able to help you. So I'm glad they helped you. I'm really, really glad. I'm really glad. And again, so what we've done was, we've hopefully have eased anxiety, and we know that that's always our goal. So have we done that? Have we eased the anxiety around this chi-square test? Kind of have a little bit better idea of what it is. We've seen it. we can say, now it's not that bad. I think I can pull one of those off. And if we've done that, then we've eased anxiety. Okay. And remember, for the chi-square, we're going to need to use those nominal variables. Okay. You can do them with ordinal, and it's the same process. And we went through that using SPSS version 29. Okay. Concepts, remember, association between two nominal variables. You have the exemplar to follow, to use. Please take advantage of the survey again. The recording link will be out at this site, hopefully tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon at the latest of this particular session. Okay. And also, I would like to show you that one more time. I'm actually going to go out to the web now and show you that there's a host of things that I've put out there for you. And as you can see here, remember the Pearson product moment correlation test we did, the one-way ANOVA, the t-test, the repeated measure t-test, the one sample. We talked about confidence intervals. Remember, we started descriptive statistics, visual displays of data, the very basic introductions to SPSS. And we went through the process of all of these. And tomorrow, what will be here that should show up, that will be the chi-square test of association. So everybody kind of sees how our little ecosystem works. Am I correct? Do we kind of understand how all this is going together here now? Okay. So someone has said they want the link. So let me take that copy, but it's the same link that's in the presentation, but I'll put it here. Give me a second, paste. And it's in the chat now at the very bottom. Okay. So hopefully you can see that statistics, it's really not that intimidating. And it can be a very, believe it or not, enjoyable experience. Unlike many people have to experience, unfortunately, in their journey. So that's all that I have this afternoon. Remember, go out to that website and, you may have some questions about some things, and go to those resources there. And, you may get your question answered sooner than later and don't need to waste some time, getting an answer or waiting on a session or something of that nature. Okay. So thank you very much for your attendance, and good luck with this week's chi-square test, or also just, picking up a journal article with the chi-square test, and now that you're able to understand, what that author did, what that means, and how to understand that, but more importantly, now to critically analyze the literature. And when you start writing your dissertation and you start seeing the words critically analyze the literature, it does not mean to repeat what you read, okay? It does not mean restating the questions, restating this, restating that, critically analyzing that. And now you are starting to get armed with the information that you need to critically analyze those quantitative studies. What popped out to you that doesn't seem right from perhaps something you may have picked up in this session? What would you have done differently if you did that study? Was that sample size sufficient, you think? All those types of things. Did the author use the right scales of measurement? Did the author talk about those scales of measurement? Are you able to really understand and have faith in the results of those statistical analyses? All of these things that we've talked about, the assumptions, evaluating those, that's what critical analysis is. Okay, so it's not just clicking buttons and saying I'm going to do a statistical test, but also you're going to be reading and consuming a lot of literature. And hopefully now this has kind of helped you to understand how to better read that literature. Has that author said anything about the assumptions? Did they meet the assumptions? If not, what does that mean to you? Do you trust those results? This is what you talk about in a well-written literature review. Am I making sense here? Rather than just regurgitating what you read, but analyzing what you read from what you're learning in your classrooms in these sessions. Okay, that's what you are to be doing. Okay. So other than that, I think my dinner is calling. I don't have anything else. As always, I'll leave the classroom open for a few minutes if someone hasn't grabbed the information from the chat. And you always know how to reach me via email if anything I can do to help you in your journey. Okay, so everyone, please have a great evening and be on the lookout for the video and on the lookout for the next announcement for whatever may be coming next. Okay, so thank you.